Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Infinity Stones and Dragon Bones. This is a podcast where we discuss films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I am your host, Derek McDuff, and joining me today is the host of Marvel A to Z, James Bianco. How's it going, James?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, excited to have you on and to talk about Captain America Brave New World, which is, of course, the newest Marvel release. As we were kind of talking about, there hasn't been at least anything theatrical in a little while, but I'm glad to have you here. Before we get into it, you have your own Marvel podcast, so obviously you like Marvel. What can you tell me about yourself and your fandom?
Let's see. I've been a fan of Marvel Comics since I was a little kid. Like pretty much some of the first stuff that I grew up reading was the Silver Age stories from Stan and Jack. My dad had a bunch and he got me some collected volumes, so I read them pretty voraciously. And then when I was like a teen pretty much, I realized that it was really just Marvel that I was super passionate about because the world was so interconnected. And I kind of abandoned DC in that era. No offense to any of the DC fans. And from that point, I realized that the level of knowledge I had was really unlike anyone else that I knew. And the way I described it to people is that the MCU made the knowledge I already had useful, so I never had to go and learn anything useful. Because now everybody cares about Marvel, but when I was into it, nobody even knew who Iron Man was. So yeah, it's just kind of
Right.
been my journey. I love the films because even if they're not all as good as the comics stories, it makes everybody want to talk about it and pay attention to the story. So, it's a valuable thing in itself.
Yeah, very, very cool. Yeah, I think you and I have, roughly a similar journey where, yeah, I was, big comics fan in the day. I didn't read as much. I did a little bit. I read the Ultimates, but I was really big
Mhm.
on like, especially the '90s TV shows,
Yeah,
and
so many people
yeah,
were.
and how interconnected those were. That was kind of the original cinematic superhero universe, and eventually came around to the Marvel movies and became a huge fan of those. What's your history with the MCU specifically, though?
So I've been in it pretty much since day one. I remember I was still pretty young when like Iron Man and the Incredible Hulk came out, but as soon as those were released on DVD, I was begging my parents to buy them. So I got on that. And then pretty much like from that day forward, I don't think I missed a premiere. And to this day, I see the premiere of every Marvel movie. When there's a Marvel show on Disney Plus, I'm watching it as it comes out. Like my dedication towards the MCU is pretty strong. And I know people say that like the phases have been weaker since Endgame. That's a whole nother thing I could talk about. But my excitement for MCU stuff, it's pretty much consistently very high. I'm not gonna lie to you.
Yeah, yeah, we're on this in the same boat then. So I
Nice.
guess because I have definitely been a defender of a lot of recent Marvel stuff. But I guess that leads us to Brave New World, or as I like to call it, Captain America 4: The Incredible Hulk
Yep.
2. Um, but yeah, what did you think of this one, and where it kind of falls in, because obviously we've got a new Captain America. It's setting some things up. You're seeing a lot of characters that we haven't seen, as I alluded to, since 2010 in that first Incredible Hulk movie, only
Yeah.
Incredible Hulk movie. What did you think of this one?
So as a whole, what I told everybody was that it was good, not great. And
Hmm.
I still feel like that's a pretty solid way to describe it. There is more fun stuff to watch and interesting stuff to watch in the movie than there is that's gonna bore you, in my opinion. I thought that most of the fight scenes, they're not Winter Soldier level, even though supposedly the same choreographer, James Young, was on the set for them. They weren't quite Winter Soldier. It wasn't as visually spectacular as like Civil War, but I still enjoyed it, especially all the flight sequences with Captain America and Falcon. I thought they were good. I love seeing Celestial Island up close. And then, of course, the big reveal. I call it a reveal, though the promotional materials may have given it away, but I'll complain about that in a bit, probably. The big reveal with Red Hulk, what's going on with Thaddeus Ross, was great. So, as a whole, I feel like it's like a 7 out of 10. I think that's my view. I don't know if you feel the same or a little stronger for it.
Yeah, for me, I think I like I said, I've been a defender of a lot of these more recent Marvel projects.
Mhm.
This is probably one of my least favorite Marvel movies. I still definitely enjoyed it. I don't think it's a bad movie by any stretch of the imagination, but
Yeah.
I don't know that I'm gonna rewatch this one anytime
Mm.
soon.
Sure.
It's kind of just there. It's kind of just, a movie that exists. I really wanted to like it a lot more.
Yeah.
Um, Unfortunately, I was like, okay, this is a movie, we've got like a Black Captain America. We're bringing all these things back that we haven't seen. Like if you're a diehard Marvel fan, you're like, okay, there's the Celestial, like yeah,
Yep.
that's been going on with that since Eternals. And oh, what? It's adamantium. That's how they're gonna bring
Oh, that's
adamantium into
huge.
this
Yeah, that's
universe.
huge that they were
Hmm.
introducing adamantium. And I'd go so far as to say I thought it was extremely clever to introduce adamantium as something that Cersei made when she made the Celestial into metal. Like, what a clever way to explain its
Mm.
existence in the universe. Because I'm fine with it not copying the comics verbatim. And the thing is, if adamantium had been there all along, then why are they always saying vibranium's the strongest metal? Why has anyone utilized adamantium? It makes sense. It's a new creation. So see, moments like that bring the score up for me because I think that's a clever execution. But I think I'm there with you that it's not the strongest of the recent films. There's moments that I think we'll talk about that fell a little short throughout. And real quick,
Hmm.
I say one other thing because you mentioned I thought it was awesome that we had a Black Captain America that he took up the mantle. This isn't called Falcon One. This is
Hmm.
Captain America 4. I was such a huge proponent of the Falcon and Winter Soldier show. I know not everyone loved it, but I'm actually of the opinion that that is the Disney Plus show currently with the most rewatchability to it.
Mm.
Because hear me out,
Hmm.
almost every other Disney Plus show, whether you're looking at What If or WandaVision or Moon Knight, it's kind of all predicated on a mystery slowly being revealed throughout. Whereas Falcon and Winter Soldier is just a political action thriller. So I've watched that more times, I think, than any other show other than maybe Loki. Even Loki, which I love, is really just a mystery playing out who is at the end of time. But Falcon and Winter Soldier exists in its own place for the Disney Plus shows, and it's really solid. So I was just all in, ready to love this. I'm putting that out there to say I don't think I was biased at all going into it. If anything, I was biased to like it more.
Yeah, that's fair. And I will say I really also enjoyed Falcon the Winter Soldier. Maybe not quite as much as you. I do. There was some other Disney stuff that I didn't Disney Plus stuff that I did enjoy a bit more, but I liked it a lot. This one didn't really hit that same. I kind of like walked out of it thinking like, that was fine, but like I really enjoyed Falcon the Winter Soldier a lot more.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about it, I think one of the reasons was that I think Falcon the Winter Soldier, while being a political thriller and stuff like that, it still felt more fun. This one, I think it just kind of I wanted this movie to be a little more fun, a little more silly, have a little bit brevity. And really, the
Yeah.
only time I felt that was when the Soldier showed up. When you had the scene with Sebastian Stan, and I
Yeah.
was like, oh,
Yeah.
that was one of the high points of the movie. I'm like, this is a movie where Harrison Ford turns into a gigantic red monster. Like, it's got Anthony Mackie, one of the silliest guys in the MCU,
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
leading role for the first time. I kind of wanted it to be a little more because it's inherently a very like the premise of this movie is very silly. Like the president's being slipped these like gamma ray pills by like super smart evil Tim Blake Nelson, and I'm
Yeah.
like. I'm like, this movie is just like it. It's very, like you said, it's trying very hard to be Captain America and the Winter Soldier, and
Right.
I think it doesn't need to be. And I think I don't know if
Mm.
what the plan was all along, but you can really tell this movie was very like reshoots just really shaped this
Yeah.
movie to the point where I think Giancarlo Esposito wasn't even in the original film. Like he's
Yeah.
only there for
Yeah. You're
reshoots,
right.
which is
So,
it's weird because he's huge in the movie and then he just kind of disappears. So yeah,
oh,
go ahead.
you've spoken to so much stuff that has been on my mind about this movie since I saw it. And the first thing being, I was reading about his involvement too, and it looked like all the reshoots, which they were confined in their defense to 22 days. That's what the Hollywood
Mm,
Reporter got, which I think is the most legitimate organization that made a claim to it, is that 22 days of reshoots, which is fair. But I think it was all surrounding Sidewinder's involvement. And here's my
mm,
problem is that they had cast like Seth Rollins, the wrestler, as King Cobra. And his ability, he's part of the Serpent Society too, is his bones can completely like bend like rubber. It's really hard to get a hold of him. He'll bend through like a windpipe and escape
mm,
somewhere. And then they had Diamondback, who has this like bright pink hair. She actually dates Captain America for a time in Mark Grenwold's original run. And she has like poisonous stingers that she holds in her hands, very much snake like on theme. apparently those two, in addition to, I'm assuming, other members of the Serpent Society, they were just kicked off, and they had Sidewinder, Esposito's character, come in instead, who exhibits obviously no superpowers or anything like that. But even though he's a phenomenal actor, you can't lie, like those scenes fall short, which is so ironic that they're the ones they went in and replaced it with. You're right, like the premise of this movie is very comic booky and silly. The fact that they took time to take away two characters who, wrestlers, like they're literally going to be, I think, a big visual presence, and they'll probably do something a little crazy. I think they took it away because they wanted it more grounded. And to that end, I ask why? Why would you want it more grounded? It's a comic book film. Like guys flying around at Mach 5. I just don't see the vision. Um, I'll stop there, but I have more to say about Sidewinder's character if I'm being honest.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, feel free because like I did feel that a lot, and it felt like like I saw like a poster where it's Falcon and Red Hulk standing on like that aircraft carrier. So it was like, was there a scene with that? Because I kind of
Yeah.
was like really like, okay, like we're built like that's gonna happen, and then obviously it just kind of that scene just kind of ends and falls flat. It's still a good scene, but you're like, okay, the whole movie you're kind of like, when is the Red Hulk gonna show up? And
Yeah, well, that's a whole nother very serious problem, and
yeah.
I'm not gonna say it's the director's fault. Here's the thing about Marvel being under Disney, is their
Mm.
promotional materials are often downright terrible. I remember when Ragnarok came out, and they kept showing that scene, which is a hilarious moment in the movie where Hulk, Worldbreaker Hulk, Gladiator Hulk, he burst into the arena, and Thor is like, "Oh, he's a friend from work." It's a good line, it's funny, but you put it in every trailer. And so now you watch Ragnarok and they say you'll never defeat his champion. No one's defeated the champion. We know exactly who he's talking about. There's no big reveal anymore. Kevin Feige even spoke to this at the world premiere of Doctor Strange Multiverse and Madness. I'm not sure if you saw this clip, but in an interview, he said, I think the marketing guys showed too much, but it's
Yeah.
still going to be a great movie. Like, he admitted it, and he's the one in charge of the creative direction over there. So I think this had that problem dialed up to 11 because if you watch the movie and theoretically you haven't seen the poster or a trailer or any of the toys, you watch the movie and you're like, what is going on with Thaddeus? Is he dying? Like, and that is the answer. He's dying, but what is going on with him? Imagine the first time or the time that he turns into the Red Hulk. That would be huge, but we all knew it. So everyone's in the movie waiting for it to happen, like you just said. And that is such a shame. And it's not a problem with the storytelling, it is a problem with the marketing.
Yeah, it's really a catch-22 because it's like, okay, you've got Harrison Ford as your main villain, as the Red Hulk, and it's one of those things that's like, okay, the movie wants to, delay that, make it kind of a mystery, but it's like, okay, at the same time, people who like anybody who knows things about comics knows who
Yeah.
Thaddeus Ross is, that he turns into, the Red Hulk. So, that's
Yeah.
how the door is. It's like also like you have to you can't it's hard to promote your movie when, the one of the biggest stars in the world is turning into this like iconic
Yeah.
character, and it's like,
You're
oh,
right.
but he doesn't show up till the so they can really it's like, what do you do? You there and yeah, I it's got some story structural things that are weird, like we talked about, like that. I don't know if I would have changed that, if I would have been like, okay, put him in earlier, or if you would have just like maybe changed the marketing and make it seem like Esposito is like the main villain, or like feature the leader a lot more. But obviously,
Yeah.
Tim Blake
Yeah.
Nelson doesn't have the star power that Harrison
I
Ford does.
Well, see, I was kind of under the impression that maybe that's why they added Giancarlo at the last second. Imagine
Mm.
they're like, well, we need to show a villain. We can't show Red Hulk because he's the big reveal, and we need someone with star power. So add him because the leader doesn't have enough of that, or Tim Blake Nelson doesn't have enough of that. So okay, well, now you have two villains you can show on the posters, including the villain from Breaking Bad that everyone agrees is such a talented actor. I just feel like it could have been done, and I know you're right. Like the Red Hulk is going to be a bigger selling point, especially to kids or people looking at the movie than anything else. But then, as an adult consumer, I hate that the plot was sacrificed, the narrative integrity was
Mhm.
sacrificed for the promotional materials that you literally cannot avoid.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, and that's always kind of a problem with Marvel. I always try to avoid trailers because of that, but this just the Red Hulk was everywhere. There's a big giant one in the lobby for the movie theater I saw.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
there's like the Red
Popcorn
Hulk
bucket.
popcorn bucket. Yep, yep, the popcorn buckets. And so it's really kind of inescapable.
Yeah.
So, I don't know how well it would have worked if we had gone into the movie not knowing that. That's impossible to know. But I still would
Right.
have liked him to, because I'm just kind of like waiting the whole movie. I'm like, all right, when is he going to show up? And the leader. It's the thing with the leader too, and his whole plan to turn him into the Red Hulk is it's just this dumb, ridiculous plan. He's like, I'm gonna embarrass him. I'm gonna turn him into. And you're just like, that's it. That's your whole plan. Is he's gonna get mad and
Oh well,
people are
okay,
gonna.
wait.
All right, yeah.
Before we talk about bad plans, because I have got to call this out to another person who's seen the movie. I love that Sidewinder, Giancarlo's character, he
Mhm.
is this rogue terror cell leader, genius strategist, and he's managed to steal this precious metal from a world power. Then what's his next move after when he escapes? He shows up on the road that Captain America's driving on with a gun and shoots into his car vaguely, and then he gets taken out. So I love that this terror cell organizer's plan to kill someone is also the plan of a crack addict who stumbles upon a weapon. They both did the same. He walked out into the street and fired. I kept waiting for the payoff. In fact, Sidewinder's whole deal. Can I go on a small rant about the
Please
comics?
go. Yeah, go ahead.
So Sidewinder's whole deal in the comics is actually quite interesting. He's kind of a bureaucrat, but he's really intelligent. He forms a Serpent Society, and his first issue is like, as villains, we don't have enough like stability. If you join this group, he says like, oh, you'll have dental insurance. You will have lawyers who can come consult for you. Like, I'm going to pay for all this. And then he says, final perk, I have the ability to get you out of any cell. If they arrest you, I will get you out, and he uses his cloak he throws over himself, and he can transport Sidewind out of any location and out. And
Mm.
that's what he does for his group. He goes in to a jail cell, gets Diamondback, Sidewinds, he's out. So bear with me, because I've read all this and I'm such a fan of the old comics. He shows up with a gun, shoots it at Captain America. Captain America's got him dead to rights, and I'm like, oh, this is about to be so epic. He's about to say, you have no idea who you're dealing with, and then he's going to throw a
Diplomatic
cloak over himself.
immunity.
Exactly, that kind of thing. And I thought he was gonna literally disappear, and like
Mm.
that cat would be all flabbergasted, and instead he just gets like drop kicked and then he gets arrested. So I couldn't get over the bad planning from the villains in this movie,
Yeah,
honestly.
it's pretty atrocious, and I've been pretty lenient on some of the plots for some of these Marvel movies.
Mhm.
But this one I think really, and maybe it's because it's just a little bit worse, and maybe it's because this movie is taking itself deadly seriously. But I was
Mm.
just like, when the plot of Deadpool and Wolverine is ridiculous, it's like one thing. It's like, okay, whatever.
Yeah,
But like this movie is like taking itself so like this is a spy thriller from the
yeah,
1970s
yeah.
style thing, like, and I'm like, all right. And then, to stay with the Serpent Society, it's when Sidewinder is caught and he kind of goes back and has that classic like scene where he's like talking to him in jail like they do in a lot of these movies,
Right.
and he's like, ah, well, when I escape, you'll never catch me again. I was like, oh shit, okay, so we're not done with this guy. We're gonna have him like come back at some point, and then he never even has a scene. And I was like, okay, well, he never showed back up. Surely
I
this post-credit scene is gonna be him
no.
escaping. And it was like the dumbest. Like I was like, so he's like, I'm gonna escape, and then just never does. Like it's never
I
touched him
think
again.
I think they were trying to tell, like, I think they were telling Giancarlo, like, hey man, like we get it. We brought you in the last month to film these
Mm,
action sequences, but this is opening the door for something bigger. That's kind of how I took that. That he was probably
mm.
like, I need a scene where I'm still kicking and I'm not necessarily just like going quietly into the night. That's just what I was thinking when that happened. Because you're right, it's so anticlimactic.
Yeah, and to keep with that post-credit scene,
Mm.
like that was nothing, right? That was just one of the like most post-credit
So,
scenes I've ever seen.
so bear with me because I
All right,
gave the post credit scene a lot of thought, and after
please.
I saw the movie, I wrote down the exact thing that he said. There's a key phrase here. Sorry, and he says, "You think you're the only world with heroes. You're not the only world with heroes. What happens when you have to fight them?" Okay, that's
Mm,
essentially what he says in the post credit scene. So I know a lot of people were saying it's a nothing burger, and that if this had happened 5 movies ago to introduce the concept of a multiverse, it might be worth it. But because of where we're at today, it's not. The thing that I took from it, and this is probably again me biased because I've read so many comics, is that when the multiverse starts to collide, he's referring to the incursions that lead to Secret Wars. Have you read that run of comics by chance?
no, but I through osmosis know enough about it.
Okay. Yeah, the universes are colliding and worlds are
Mm,
smashing together. And one of the best stories that come from it, this is Jonathan Hickman's run, is we find that our group of heroes, such as Mr. Fantastic, Black Panther, Doctor Strange, Hulk, all our heroes, they go down to another Earth to see what they can do. Can they use Infinity Stones to push it away? Can they phase it out of reality for a time so we avoid collision? What can we do to save our world? And the worst possible thing happens. They get down to this other planet and they meet a group of people called the Great Society. The Great Society is, imagine our Avengers, but they're infinitely more noble and heroic and good. They have dealt with multiple incursions and they've never even considered the possibility they would have to fight other heroes or blow up another world. They're like, that's not on the table. We will find a way to save everyone. Our heroes that we've watched for all of our lives be heroic and save the day are standing there with a world bomb prepared to blow up their planet. And they're like, well, like, what are you going to do about this one? Like, what's your plan? And the Great Society is like, we don't have a plan, but we simply hope. And it's Namor the Submariner who says, well, I hope you have a better plan than that because, like, we're going to blow your Earth up. It's such a heavy and tragic moment because Black Panther explains it. We're not fighting villains, we are fighting heroes. And it is so much worse because we know they're good people and they're noble and they're more heroic than us, but we have to defeat them right now. So you're probably like, this guy's crazy. He's reading way into this. He's trying to be too kind. But I read it as specifically, you're not going to just be in like a battle with some ethereal multiverse power or an evil spirit or the incursions themselves. You might get to an alternate reality where you see Hulk and Captain America and Iron Man with some deviations. Not saying all those actors will come back, and you will have to fight them to the death to save your world. So I think that's maybe what he was saying. Can you bear with me through that, or what do you think? Am I crazy?
You know what? I think, you know what? That's a reach, but hey, sometimes these reaches end up being real, I mean, it's a little bit Mephisto in WandaVision, but
oh gosh,
you know
don't compare me to that. Don't compare me to that.
No, not quite that much. Because yeah, so you might be right. Obviously you have a lot of comics knowledge that a lot of people, including
Sometimes
myself,
that,
even
that
don't
knowledge
have.
misleads me. I'll admit it.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm like, clearly this is where they're going, and it doesn't happen.
See, and that's why I said the Mephisto thing, because I know that was obviously, you're not in that same ballpark. That was a lot, but that was a lot of people who were like, know way too much about comics, being like, that's what this is. Clearly, you guys don't. And I'm just like, dude,
Yeah.
I've seen TV. It's not going to
Yeah,
be
that's
Mephisto
fair. Well,
but
wait, listen. I did
yeah,
find the line. Can I read it to you?
yes,
To try
please,
to
please.
defend myself to the listeners. This is what the leader says. All you heroes protecting this world, you think you're the only ones? You think this is the only world? We'll see what happens when you have to protect this place from the others. I think it was written very intentionally to emphasize. He says, all you heroes, and then to lean into, we'll see what happens when you have to protect this place from the others. If it was just villains or an incursion itself, I don't think it would be written this way. Man, what do I know? I might be giving him too much credit.
I definitely see it being like they have to go up against some alternate version of this, and I do really like that because I think it's such a trope to be like, oh, here's the alternate reality and here's the evil versions of everyone.
Right,
To have
right,
that flipped on
exactly.
its head and be like, oh, these are the better versions of them.
Of
I think
you,
that's
yeah,
so interesting. So
yeah,
that's
yeah.
cool. I'm curious to see where. I mean, you made me a little more interested because I was like, I walked out and be like, okay, so he just told us multiverses exist. We know that,
Right.
we've seen that. So that's interesting. I
Could
like that. Yeah. But yeah, so we've been kind of down on this movie. But like we said, we both liked this movie generally. I know it's getting not great reviews. It's despite appearing like it's doing well at the box office, it had to make like 400 and something million dollars to even
It
break.
was like I think it was 425 million to break even,
Mhm.
and I think it's close to 380 million right now at the time that we're having this conversation, which is again, I just have to go on a random aside real quick. It's unfortunate because I know the budget was like 180 mil production
Mhm.
budget, and that's actually rather cheap for a Marvel movie. I think
Yeah.
that the Marvels was in the 200. I know that Ragnarok was. So it was actually kind of cheap, and I get it. Like we've been discussing, promotion's part of it. To more than like double, I think, that budget to break even. Yeah, it's a little unfortunate. I hope they recoup it. I hope it does make money. I think it would be a shame for it to literally lose money.
Yeah, and I think especially with it going on to Disney Plus and stuff, and there's
Mhm.
all that Hollywood accounting that goes into these things, but I don't think that anybody's gonna be like, "Oh, can you believe that huge bomb we released, Captain America?" For? Like, I don't.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
not the vibe here. So, I think
Yeah.
there was some naysaying at first, but I and it's underperforming maybe, but I don't think that this is going to be like, oh, it's the end of Marvel, like
Yeah,
so
yeah.
many
And
people are saying.
I'll also say it may have been I don't wanna say that the release date was a problem because Black Panther also came out in February and it did spectacular, obviously. So I don't know if it's that, but I will say having the Thunderbolts up next, which I think people kinda lean towards Bucky by and large, and he's clearly
Mm,
very much a big part of that. And then to have Fantastic Four coming up in July, I just feel like maybe some people are kinda like, I'll go see Fantastic Four, or I'll go see Thunderbolts. I don't really need to see Captain America 4. Isn't Captain America dead? Like, I feel like that's kind
right.
of what the people who aren't like you and I, who are not passionate, I think that's what the average audience might be thinking when they think about Cap 4. So, I don't know. That could
Yeah.
have weighed into it, you know?
Yeah, I think because this movie is unlike look at Captain America 3, which was like, okay, we're bringing in everybody. Like this
Mhm.
movie's like, we're bringing in the Falcon, the former Falcon. So if you liked the sidekick from last movies, it's the kind of a sequel to Falcon and Winter Soldier, and
Mhm.
then a bunch of people, some of whom have been recast from a pretty not well liked Marvel movie from like
20
2010.
years ago, I
Yeah, like
know.
20 years ago. It's just like, all right, 25 years, or what is it, 15 years ago, I guess now. Yeah,
Like
2010.
that, yeah.
Yeah, math. But like, yeah. So I think that was a big thing. Whereas, like, yeah, Thunderbolts is probably has a lot more appeal. It's a lot of the more liked characters, and then like, okay, we're finally bringing back the Fantastic Four, and you've got
Right.
Pedro and all these actors that people love in that. So I think that one, those ones will do a little bit better. I think.
I think so too.
Yeah. Yeah. But I know we've been, like I said, we've been kind of hard on this movie.
Yeah,
I
you're right.
wanted to circle back to, because I'm usually the one, defending these Marvel movies. I wanted to talk about some stuff in this movie that you really liked. Was there anything in particular that you wanted to shout out about Captain America 4?
Yeah, so like I said, my favorite part of Falcon and Winter Soldier was the high flying action sequences. There's a moment in that show where he does a flip and kicks a helicopter in the middle of the air and it starts to spiral out of control. I love that stuff because not every hero has the opportunity to do that, like just pragmatically. A lot of our heroes do stuff that's a lot less visually intense. Even Captain America Steve Rogers is a guy with a shield. But when you give and Wilson the ability to fly. And there's a moment I think he like surfs on a missile before
Yeah.
getting like that's so cool. He's throwing his shield up in the air and catching it. For the visual aspects of the film, I really liked it quite a bit. And I know some people had complaints about green screen or graininess. Well, I'm not a film critic, if I'm being honest, and I didn't really notice any of that to me. It didn't really stand out enough to make me think, oh, this doesn't look real. It's a guy flying over the Indian Ocean and a giant god throwing his shield at missiles. I know it's not real. It doesn't bother me. I love the visual spectacle of it all. That was beautiful. I love the follow up on the Celestial coming out of the Indian Ocean. I thought that was fascinating to see. I
Mm,
also liked the how pragmatic they approached it as a world building opportunity. Are there going to be treaties? All these countries are fighting for it. What is the utilization of this metal going to be? They really didn't leave much, to say, we'll just let the fans figure it out. Yes, it took a long time to get here, but I feel like they're giving things their due attention now. So I liked how much they followed up on.
would really agree with that. I think Marvel has always, one really big strength of the MCU is that they leave no stone unturned, right? They're
Mm-hmm.
like, because I actually saw, I was at Comic-Con this last year and saw the Marvel panel, and when they were bringing all the actors out and stuff like that, and Tim Blake Nelson came out, he's like, yeah, I've just been like, they're like, he's been laying on the floor for 15 years with like the Hulk blood dripping into his head or whatever. And it's like, yeah, that was
Nice.
like that was like, this like this checked, like this plot thread that was left in
Right.
a movie that we thought was never gonna get, like, they're never gonna go back and like address what happened to the leader, what happened to the Tim Blake Nelson, character
Yeah.
actor from Holes and Oh Brother Where Art Thou. Like, we're gonna bring him, but like, no, we're bringing him back. We're bringing Betsy Ross back. It's like, oh well,
Yeah.
William Hurt died, and it's like, well, they recast him with Harrison Ford, an even more prolific, like, beloved actor. And
Mhm.
it's just like, yeah, they really, and like you said, let's, are we going to see any of that stuff from the Eternals? Like, and I'm sure in some regard we will. And it's Marvel has always been so good at that. And my kind of like tongue-in-cheek joking letterbox review when I saw Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness was like me in 2015 watching the Immortals. I'm just like, what am I watching this shit for? And then me in 2022, Kevin Feige, you magnificent bastard, you brought back. Like they always find a way to these
Yeah, they
things that you
loop it
think are
in.
these things that you think are so insignificant that are just like trash that nobody cared about or whatever that like are never going to get addressed, and they bring it back. And this movie did a lot with that. Like it's like, okay, and there's a lot of reasons we never got a proper Hulk sequel, while he kind of like had his own
Mhm.
story like seeded through, and it has to do with rights and Universal having rights to a Hulk's solo movie
Yeah,
and stuff
yeah.
like that. Um, but and so we got the follow up to his story, obviously, but then we never really got a follow up to everything else that was happening in that movie. And so it's nice to
Right.
see that come in. It's nice to see the follow up from all the things set up in Falcon and Winter Soldier. And then, as you mentioned, it's like, oh, like I like that there's just been a giant dude made of like this crazy metal in the ocean, and other than like a few like jokey like things in
Yeah,
like
like a
that will
She-Hulk
show.
headline. I
Yeah,
remember.
there's been a
Yep.
couple like little things like that, but it's just like this seems like it would be a pretty big deal, and this movie's like it is a pretty big deal. Nobody needs to mention what happened in the Eternals or in that first Hulk movie necessarily,
Mhm.
but we can be like, okay, this is all important and following it up. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's well put. And then like I had mentioned, I think my favorite thing about this movie, I mentioned that Harrison Ford kind of steps into this role, that was one of the other few things they had brought back from that Hulk movie was, Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross.
Mhm.
You have William Hurt in that role for a really long time, and it's like, okay, well, obviously, he passes away, and they recast with Ford, who, I think is kind of incredible in this movie. Like Harrison
Oh,
Ford.
I agree. It's actually quite strange how good he is.
Yeah, like hot take, Harrison Ford's a really good actor, and I think his character is like whatever, like his plot line, like I said, is ridiculous. He's like,
Mhm.
I've got cancer, and I've got these crazy pills that I had never had any doctor look at, but I'm just popping in my mouth like Mentos, and you're like, okay, whatever. But he brings such like emotion and pathos and like sadness, and like he's this guy who's like you know like hurt his family and his like he's weirdly sympathetic, which I'm like, man,
Yeah.
you made me sympathetic to like a president who was like scheming and undermining everything for his own personal benefits. That is an accomplishment in 2025. I'll say that for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, he really brings it to this movie, and even in the moments when he's just like doing his like raging out, or he's just like, Sam, talk to me, like he is just, you see why this dude is absolutely one of the greatest actors, not just
Yeah.
of his generation, but of all time. What did you think of Ford's performance?
Oh, I loved his performance throughout, and I think that you're speaking about something that doesn't get enough recognition, which is the turmoil that you see, or like the fact that he knows he's hurt his family. And it's why one note that I came away with immediately, especially after I watched how they handled Leader and Sidewinder, is that they should have made him even more central. I know many people would argue like he's kind of second billing, and he is, but there's some level of tragedy to the fact that Thaddeus, which is the only thing that I think the average viewer knows about him, is he wants to hunt Hulk, like he hates Hulk. He becomes the very monster he swears to destroy to his daughter and that his whole life mission has been about. And I think because it only comes up in the last 5 minutes, we get none of that. We
Mm.
get his apology on the raft where he's like, I've got to take responsibility, whatever. But bro, you now have the problem that the guy who you have despised and like been hunting and you made your life mission to kill, you have the exact same problem. You have literally become the monster you wanted to destroy. That is like old school, poetic, beautiful irony, right? And we get
Mm.
none of that because he doesn't even Hulk out until the last few minutes, which I think it's good that they kind of save that amazing sequence to the end. It makes sense, but you weren't doing a lot with Sidewinder or Leader anyway. So we couldn't have just kind of made the movie around those two characters, around Sam and Thaddeus. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like they could have definitely done something where, like either his roles expanded or they did more with the leader side. They're all just kind of like there, and it's so I
Yeah.
feel like it's very weirdly structured. Like the
Mhm.
the plot, and I think that is definitely a casualty of the reshoots of the too many cooks in the kitchen type thing that
Yeah, that
sometimes
could
these
be.
Marvel movies can run into. And I think that would have been a lot better if, if we had seen that struggle from Ross, where he's like, I've been
Yeah,
trying to hunt this monster, like the he who hunts monsters thing, and
right.
we had seen more of that, excuse me, in the movie. We don't really get that, unfortunately. So that moment when he has that kind of like at the end, he has that redemptive moment, and I'm just kind of like, wow, a president actually went to jail. Who would have thought? Like that would be cool.
Yeah, and like
But
assigned himself, I believe they mentioned like it was
mhm.
self accountability.
Yeah, and I was just like, man, it was. I was like, well, only in Marvel, I guess. But I really was like, that's a cool moment, and because Ford is so good, I believe the arc, but I don't believe that. I don't want to say the writing didn't get it there because I'm sure like the writing was there at some point, but
Mhm.
because of the editing, the reshoots, all that stuff, it
Yeah.
didn't come across. Other than in Ford just being so good.
Right, right. I'll say what you mentioned is that even though the acting is that good, and I said I'm no, prestigious film critic, whatever, it often feels like we watch one thing happen into the next thing happening.
Mm.
Like just here you go, an events that occurred. Okay, now we're in West Virginia at the hidden base. Okay, now we're in the Indian Ocean. It really does feel a bit choppy at times, and you're just like going in for these key moments. Whereas some films, like I think of Age of Ultron, where they have like a 15-minute sequence that takes place on Hawkeye's farm, and you're like, well, this isn't the most important moment because no plot beats happening, but character growth is happening, and Iron Man's learning something about family and about his conversation with Nick Fury. Like small things happen that don't look like they matter, but they do. You didn't get really any conversation like that in this, with the exception of I think Sam and Bucky having that very sentimental heart to heart when the new Falcon, um, what's his name, Joaquin, is hurt.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, there those the scenes that as a kid it's like, okay, this is the time when I get up and go to the bathroom, but then as an adult you realize like, no, this is what the movie's about, right? Like
Right,
those
right.
scenes, it's I always think of that scene in Jurassic Park where Hammond and Ellie are just like eating the Jello, and it kind of gives you the moral of the movie. It's like you know the whole life finds a way, and they're
Yeah.
they're having that conversation, and then it's like, okay, back to the Raptors, but now you get the point of the movie, right? And
Yeah.
there's not really that many quiet moments like that in this movie, and I know that's a wider problem than just this movie or even just Marvel movies. That's a kind of action movies in
Mhm,
general losing like a lot of those scenes. But
mhm.
I did like the scene, even though I was kind of like, really, Falcon was your favorite. You wanted to be Falcon. When at the end, when Joaquin was like, I wanted to be you, like I really liked the back and forth between them. Once again, it was
Yeah,
something like,
yeah.
I was like, I don't know how we got to this point because there was nothing leading up to it. But I really
Mm.
liked that. I liked Falcon feeling like he was responsible for putting him in the hospital, and just kind of their dynamic was one of my favorite
Yeah.
things of the film.
Yeah, we haven't talked about it much, but I actually really like the new Falcon, Joaquin Torres. I like him in the role. I thought that when him and Sam are talking, it's usually funny, but that's the thing. It was kind of just funny until it wasn't. So I don't feel like
Hmm.
we necessarily saw the mentorship as much as we could have. It didn't feel like it necessarily landed for me, even though his acting was great and the funny moments were good, the character moments were good. I think we could have more slowly arrived at the point that we did by the end of the movie.
Yeah, exactly. And I just think that's one of the things. I think maybe there's, a cut of this that doesn't have the Serpent Society, or maybe there's a 4-hour version that has everything in it, but I just don't think, with the runtime of this movie, you're
Yeah.
going to be able to do all the things that this movie, and maybe this, would have been like a Disney Plus show, but then, obviously they already had a Falcon Winter Soldier
Right.
Disney Plus show. They spent, almost $200 million on this movie before marketing. So this is not going to be a Disney Plus show, but yeah, I think
Yeah,
there
that's
is
true.
there's an alternate version. There's some deleted scenes that make those emotional connections a little bit stronger.
Yeah.
But
Well, so
yeah.
speaking of the emotional
Mhm.
connections, though, and this is kind of indicative of, I think, what the movie did a little wrong. We haven't even discussed Isaiah Bradley's character. And, like, he's so
Mm.
important, but here we are doing, I think, a fine job discussing all the merits of the movie, and he hasn't come up. So isn't that kind of indicative of how he's kind of an aside when he's, like, the heartbeat, I think, of the movie? It's a black man
Yeah.
who's been wrongfully imprisoned and accused of a crime he didn't commit or he's not responsible for, rather. Like, that's huge. But yet it's barely there.
Yeah, that's a really good point because like that seems like it should be the emotional core of the movie, and it's something that it goes back to once or twice. But like
Mhm.
Bradley is so good, he
Oh
and
yeah.
like he should be like you said the beating heart of the movie, and those scenes hit really well, and obviously the performance is like impeccable, and
Mhm.
it's like you said it's this black man who had been like wrongfully imprisoned for decades, had been experimented on by the US government, and then he's now in jail again. And yeah, like it should have been more. It should have been more interesting and
Yeah.
deeper. Shout out to Carl Lumbly, who you know
Yeah.
great
Great
actor.
job
He's
playing him.
so good in this. I don't know. Did you want to talk any more about like that whole kind of plot line?
Just that I think maybe what I feel like is that it existed in its own world throughout the movie, and then the other shameful thing is that his conversations he ends up having, and the person who I think comes and like lets him out and investigates is Ruth Bat Seraph's character, that character,
Mm.
the Israeli spy Black Widow, and unfortunately, I don't think they gave her enough to do. I just didn't see her as a strong character because even though she had some cool moments. I feel like she was an afterthought, and how can I be saying that about so many characters, but it still feels like that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and yeah, there's a lot of character. This felt like this movie was like trying to check a lot of boxes. It's like, okay,
Yeah, yeah.
we're gonna have this other Black Widow, we're gonna have the old Captain America, we're gonna have the Red Hulk, we're gonna have the Serpent Society, and then they just kept adding more and more in, and not really giving anyone enough time to
Yes,
breathe.
I think that's what it comes down to is that, they tried to do it with Thaddeus Ross characters, Red Hulk, and did a good enough job, but then when we get someone like, Samuel Stearns, we get the leader. I don't know if you noticed this, but he doesn't even get referred to as the leader in the movie. It doesn't even happen. And I talked to my friend she doesn't know anything about comics, but she watches all the movies because her husband likes them. And then I was like talking about the movie the next day, and I said, "Yeah, when the leader does this," she said, "Who's that? Who's the leader? What are you talking about?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh! Like I didn't realize it until I'm talking to you." But yeah, that doesn't even happen. But the fact that he existed and that he was kind of a major character, but never gets the name drop, I feel like maybe you missed something there. Maybe we could have gotten a little more history or background, made him a little more compelling. I don't know what the solution is, but I feel like it fell short.
All the leader stuff with them because I did catch that because I was like seeing it with a friend who also isn't as knowledgeable as about like all this stuff, and I was like, oh,
Mhm.
he's called the leader. Like I was like, I have to tell her that because they haven't
Yeah,
referred
yeah,
to him as the leader, and it felt like and like how he's like kind of shot in the shadows, and like his
yeah.
his design is a little weird. Like it's not great in my, and I felt like an example of like this is trying to be cool. This is trying to
Sure.
like be like, oh, we're gonna be serious. We're not gonna call him the leader, which feels like an early MCU thing where it's like
Yeah,
not all those movies were like, this is serious stuff now. Like this is not silly comic booky stuff. And
right.
I think you can go one of two ways when it comes to like these comic movies. You can either embrace that, and I always think of like in like 2005 we kind of saw the two, or 2004 2005 we kind of saw the two paths, right? Because
Mhm.
Spider-Man comes out, and it's Spider-Man 2 actually for that one, but it comes out and it's like hokey, and it's like Dr. Octopus, and it's not like an entirely silly goofy movie, but it's like
Oh, no.
it's wearing its heart on its sleeve. It's wearing its comic book origins on its sleeve. J. Jonah Jameson has
Yeah.
the line of like, he guy with Spider-Man, guy with 8 arms comes Doc Ock. What are they? Doc Otto Octavius, And then at the same time, you have Batman Begins come out, which is like, hey, like this is like the real world. I think when you
Right.
run into trouble is when you split the difference.
You
When you
can't
are
decide.
when you are like, hey, this is a world where like there's like people flying around and doing all these
Mm.
impossible things. There's giant Red Hulk monster, but we also want to have it be kind of serious and not be too silly. We don't want to call this guy the leader because that sounds kind of crazy, too comic booky. We'll have the
Right.
serpent guy, but he's just going to be a dude with a gun,
Oh,
like.
so you know what? To take it even farther, because I think you're
Mm,
exactly right that some of the reshoots were to make this more realistic. Here's another thing you might not have noticed. As far as I could tell, they not once call the group Serpent Society, they call it Serpent. Is it that?
okay.
And like to me, I'm just like, wait, are they saying like the classic Marvel alliteration? You know, they love alliteration. Matt Murdock,
Right.
Reed Richards, Peter Parker. You going all day. I like Serpent Society. What's so bad about that? Can you just say it? No, we can't call it Serpent Society. We can't call him the leader. He even has that moment where he takes out that commander who was kind of reporting to Sam. He was looking into the pills for him, remember? Um,
Yeah, yeah.
comes up and he does something to that guy, and the guy's on the ground. He's like, "Who are you?" or whatever, and he pauses and dramatically goes, "I'm the hero." And I said, "Why did you have him say I'm the leader? Could he not even say it then? The guy's about to die. He doesn't even get to tell anybody. Just have him say it."
Yeah, it's just it really felt afraid to be what it is, and like I said, you don't have to go full Deadpool and Wolverine where it's making fun of itself and it's all very very goofy. You can do a lot of the thing that a lot of these Marvel movies that Spider-Man 2 blazed the path for, where it is embracing its sillier comic bookness, but it's the characters are still taking it seriously, and I think that's
Right.
what really matters. Is it like while the audience might be like, okay, well, this is a kind of silly thing. This guy with eight robotic or four robotic arms crawling around and stuff, trying to make the sun or whatever, because it matters so much to Peter Parker and the
Mhm.
people around him. You are taking it seriously as well. Sam Raimi is a
Right.
master of that, and this. It didn't. It just felt like it was afraid of its audience, like being like, "Ha, look at this."
Well, are you familiar with the concept? Some people say that they like militarize people in the Marvel movies who are meant to kind of be fantastical and costumed. Have you seen any examples of that?
I don't think I have.
A major one people go to is Batrock. He's in the beginning of Winter Soldier, if you
Oh yeah, yeah,
recall.
yeah. I
He does
remember.
that
Yeah.
like little fight with him where Cap throws his shield down to make it a fair fight. Well, in the comics, that's Batrock the Leaper, and he's like a gymnast who's super. You know, he's a villain, and he's like a bright purple suit and like a gold crown on. And obviously, they just made him a guy who looks like a warlord or whatever. Sidewinder also fell victim to this, and then finally in this movie. I think it makes our point for us that maybe it's too seriously is the fellow who the leader attacks. He attacks his heart. His name's Dennis Dunphy. You know anything about that character other than he looks into the pills?
No, other than he shares a name with a character played by Ty Burrell, who was also in the last Hulk movie. But yeah, who's the one
Yeah, and
person who
that's
didn't
kind of
come
funny,
back.
actually. You're right. Well, so get this: Dennis Dunphy in the comics, he's Demolition Man, and that is an athlete who goes to the power broker to get stronger, and he gets super strength from the power broker, who's going to be Sharon Carter in the MCU. But the side effect is, get this: he has very serious heart problems. He constantly needs to worry about his heart. If he gets too stressed, he could die, which is ironic because he can lift 10 tons, but his heart needs to stay at a low
Mm,
resting heart rate or he's going to die. And so they had the leader come and he says, like, you're going into cardiac arrest. He has a device that makes his heart beat too fast till he dies. So they know what they're doing, Eric.
hmm
They know what they're doing when they get so close to the nose on this. This is Demolition Man with a heart problem who is a super powered fool who goes around Captain America. And when I see it, I'm like, oh, that's so neat. Oh, wait, he just died. He's not going to be anything. He's going to
mm,
be a guy who was fantastical and wore a costume. And instead, he's literally in the U.S. military with their normal uniform on. So it's like
right.
this militarization of these iconic, to me, D-list
Mm.
characters, but to me, iconic characters like Batrock or Demolition Man or others.
That's fair, and it feels like, and I might piss off some people on the internet, but bear with me. But it feels like
Mhm.
kind of a Snyderization thing, like how
Yeah.
Zack Snyder had to, and I like some of those movies, but like how Zack Snyder was like, we're gonna have these be deadly, like we're gonna have Jimmy Olsen in the CIA, and then he gets shot, and you're like, why?
Oh,
Why
yeah,
would
yeah,
you
yeah.
do that? Like, why would you ever do that? And so it feels like that kind of, not to that degree, but I think that's what killed that iteration of the DCU, and
Yeah.
why they're bringing in James Gunn to be like, no, these are going to be like more fun, and like even though they're going to be like, James Gunn is like very like dark at times, they're going to be like more comic booky, for lack of a better term. And
Right,
that's
right.
why I'm also so excited for this Fantastic Four movie, because it seems like they are really leaning into the comic book roots of it, the like 60s
Yeah.
thing, and it's going to be probably set in an alternate dimension, this kind of retro future
Yeah, yeah.
60s thing, and I
I'm
am
very into it.
so stoked for that. Yeah.
It looks so good. Well, there's actually a moment in Brave New World where I think it leans into the comics the most, and I'll say this. pretty much every Marvel movie, there is a moment where I think it so closely reflects the comics I've read all my life, turned to the big screen and feels real that I get chills. And it happens pretty much every time. They usually at least nail it once or twice. In No Way Home, for instance, there's the scene where he uses his spidey sense to sniff out that Green Goblin is still evil, and there's a fight that ensues whereas he's punching Norman Osborn in the face, he's just like cackling, he's cracking up, laughing because he knows he's in Spider-Man's head. And I got chills watching it because I thought it was just that good. It was so much like a comic book come to life. So I
Hmm.
have to give it credit where it's due because we both agreed that this movie was more good than bad. There's a moment where they get to the hidden lab of Leader. I'm going to call him that anyway, even though he doesn't get the name in the film. And the leader is very clearly intentionally goading Sam and Joaquin on with like telling him what his plan is and what he's been through. And then Sam rushes forward to like attack to take him out. And then suddenly like a beam comes out of the ceiling right where he steps and it forces Sam down into the ground. You remember this moment?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. And then the leader says, "Please don't be boring." And that is so the leader. That is so good that he was like, "Yeah, I'm going to do this. He's going to run forward to stop me right at this point. So I'll just set this up here." And then for him to like not really be evil threatening, but to be like, "Ah, you're boring me, Sam. Like, please stop. Don't be boring. Make this
Hmm.
interesting if we're going to fight." I loved that moment. I wish there were more character moments like that, especially for Leader, who I think is a really underutilized character. But I'll give it credit where it's due because that was well written and well executed. And I want to call attention to the good stuff. I think the reason we probably sound like maybe we don't like it is that the good stuff is kind of simple. It's really great visuals and a great fight choreography throughout that we mostly like, or big thematic things that come up. But the bad is kind of more complex, so we're talking about it a lot longer. So I just wanted to give a moment to that. It's a great character moment.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. I really like that character moment. I also like the part in that scene when he's like, "Oh, there was only a 17% chance." Like, I don't remember what he said. But so there's a
Yeah, yeah,
17% chance you were going to do this. I thought you were going to go help Isaiah, and he's like, "Yeah, that's a good." Because like in, I think if this is Steve Rogers, he's like, "We don't trade lives," and he goes after Isaiah. He doesn't go to, but it's like, okay, like this is a different Captain America. It doesn't
yeah,
go that cliched route of like you see in so many movies. It's like, oh, we've got to like forego the mission to like go save this person. That throws a
yeah,
whole
yeah,
wrench into it. I thought that was interesting. It's like, okay, I've got all my statistics and I've got all these master plans, which none of them really work, by the way, but whatever. But he's just like, yeah, he's like, okay, I have these statistics, and that's that's the way statistics work.
yeah.
Sometimes the 17% chance will come up. That's something people don't think about statistics. So I was like that this movie understood statistics a little bit. So
I was good,
that was good.
and I will say that specific line really drew me back to the villain in Fantastic Four's original run called the Mad Thinker. His
Mm,
whole thing was statistics and playing out who would do what at what exact moment. And I mean, if you read those original comics with him, every new panel, he's saying, "Aha, I knew there was a 60% chance at least that you would flame off, thinking that this would turn off in return, you could escape." Like he's saying it the whole time. I don't know of any comics where the leader explicitly does that for a long duration, but it was very much in character. And since we're probably not going to get the Mad Thinker on screen anytime soon, I think it was very fair they gave him that. And then just to respond to one other thing you said, I love that Captain America Steve Rogers and Captain America Sam Wilson are not the same people. Um, think about how Steve joined the military. He was never going to be let in, but they're like, well, we could use him for this crazy test thing because if he dies, so what? He's not good enough to be in the military anyway. So his route into the military is so much different than anyone else. But Sam is not only someone who's in the military for we don't exactly know how long, but assigned to this special unit because he gets the whole flight gear, remember? And you
mhm,
could argue this is another militarization of a famous character because he ends up coming through the military, but he was a successful soldier. He was in fact so ideal that what does he do after? He becomes a counselor for people who are like struggling with returning to civilian life. So he was probably, as far as we can tell in the MCU, a very prime military member. So it kind of makes sense that he's like the mission. Like, if I was stationed right now and my squad leader, whatever, told me to do this thing, it doesn't matter what else happens. That's someone else's responsibility to a degree. I have to get this done. So we are going to stop. We're going to stop the leader, this terrorist, right now. So it kind of plays into the fact that him and Steve came up differently, and they are different characters, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, I like that, and that might have been, a blind spot of the leader too. He was like, oh well, thinking about old Captain America, but not
Mhm.
enough about him. Yes, yeah, and it does draw that distinction in their characters. This is a new Captain America. It's not the same old thing, and Captain America that's had different experiences. So yeah, I like that a lot. I wanted to get to one other thing, but any last thoughts on Captain America 4?
I think we've talked about everything, but I'll say this: there were 2 points I wasn't sure if you might bring up. A little trivia question that doesn't have any answer. Are you ready
Okay,
for this?
yeah, please.
Why did they call it Celestial Island? How did they know that was a
Hmm.
celestial? I couldn't figure it out. He says that during the debrief to everyone. Thaddeus says, Celestial Island with the emergence of, and I'm just sitting there like, which Eternal went to the president or whoever and said, yeah, that's called a celestial. So when
It
you name it, you can be accurate.
It was. I think it was definitely the guy. I forget what the character's name is. I think it was Brian Tyree Henry played him, who was just like made the atom bomb. I could see him being like, "Hey guys, this is
That's
this is Celestial."
Fastos. I think that's
Okay,
Fastos, if I can
yeah,
recall. He just
yeah.
went to like the government in general and said, "Hey guys, just so you know, that's a
There's
celestial. You can
that's
ignore it."
yeah. That's my head canon at least.
That's good. That's good. Yeah. So I was wondering that, and then this is actually kind of somewhat more serious of a question that the movie left me with, which is, when are we going to find out who the vice president is that is now in power? Like, surely we should know. Did I miss that, or are we waiting to find
Mm.
out?
That's a good question. And like presidents have always been weird in the MCU. Like I've kind of like it's been kind of something like I've like not fixated on, but like I've like
Mhm.
noticed because obviously you have Matthew Ellis who's the president in I want to say Iron Man 3 and then he shows up in Shield, but then Agents of Shield and then but then like there's references to like in Luke Cage he mentions Obama and then
Hmm.
Trump gets a
Hmm.
name call in like Runaways or something, and so it's
Oh,
like
real?
okay,
Oh, well,
yeah,
Runaways. That was a lawless time. They don't. They didn't have to
yeah, and
respect
so
the MCU's rules.
right, exactly. It's just like okay, maybe that was outside the industry, but maybe it's like okay, one of those things where it's like like there was the actual presidents were there, but they just had like overlapping terms. Like there was like Obama was actually only 4 years, and then Ellis showed up or something. Like
Yeah, yeah.
who knows? But like so, yeah, presidents are always kind of like a weird thing, and so yeah, I wonder like if they will be like okay, yeah. Who's the guy who like took who's the Ford to Harrison Ford or ironically
Yeah.
the Nixon of
Oh, well
Red
said.
Hulk. Yeah.
Um, okay, so one final observation, I promise, is that I touched on it just a second ago, but the fact that Sam is someone who, in his life, before he's necessarily Falcon, or certainly before he's Captain America, he is a counselor, not a therapist, but to help guide people through these complex emotions they feel after the war is over. I think it's very fitting, and I didn't see many people talking about it, but he really does solve the epic battle in the end by talking the Hulk down. Not a thing that's easy to do. Not something we've really seen anyone do, with the exception of I think Matt and Bruce. Obviously, she's able to do that because they have such a special relationship. But then there's that kind of quick joke in Ragnarok where Thor, who is Hulk's friend for all intents and purposes, cannot talk him down when they're not even fighting yet. Remember, he says like, "Sun's going down, big guy. It's just me and you," and then he gets pummeled. But Sam, who's been antagonizing this Hulk, and like they are in an epic battle, in the end, he's able to talk him down successfully. And I think that's huge because that's actually what made Sam different before anything else. Before the fighting or the vibranium wings or the shield, he was a counselor who taught people through complex emotions to help them process them. He does that to win the battle at the end of this movie. Isn't that kind of crazy?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and any MCU movie can end, or like any of these movies can end with like it's a fighty punch up, whatever. And that's the one thing that I like will sometimes throw some shade on something like Black Panther, which is an immaculate movie, but it kind of just ends with them
Mhm.
fighting rather than it being like, okay, no, the conclusion is something about this character, why this character
Yeah, it
had.
needs to be philosophical or it's going to fall
Mhm.
short, in my opinion.
Exactly. Like, why does it have to be specifically this person to do
Yeah,
this, right? Like
yeah,
like Captain America's not going to beat the Hulk, in a fist fight.
right.
But like this is the only guy who can really talk him down. Is this specific version of Captain America. So I think that's really well done. And I did think I liked the finale a lot better than anything else. We talked about the CGI-ness of it. I didn't think it was that bad. They shot in real locations with some green screens around them, so they didn't just shoot from the
Yeah.
volume. But I liked, and obviously they were really hitting hard the fact that and we knew from promotional materials like this is gonna happen in Cherry Blossom because Harrison Ford keeps
Yeah,
going,
you're right. You're
Liv
right.
Tyler, you want to go to the Cherry Blossom? So it's like okay, but like visually stunning and unlike anything I've seen before. So oh no,
Yeah,
really
I
liked
agree.
that last battle scene.
Yeah.
But yeah, before I get you out of here, because I didn't get a chance to do an episode on it, so I just wanted to be on mic talking about it a little bit. We won't.
Mhm.
I won't. Promise I won't spend too much time on it. But did you see WandaVision and what did you think?
WandaVision?
Sorry, not WandaVision. I was thinking of
Born Again?
Agatha All Along. Sorry, Agatha All Along.
Agatha All Along. Okay,
I know
yeah, I
we're a
most
little bit past it
certainly.
now, but I never got a chance to talk about it. I wanted to
Okay.
let talk about it at least a little bit.
Yeah, that's fair. I did see Agatha All Along, and I thought that the execution of the trick at the end, the big reveal, I thought it was phenomenal. I loved it.
Yeah, I would really agree with that. It's one of those things that it felt like it kind of grew out of like a time when they're like greenlight every show, all the spin-offs. Agatha All Along
Yeah,
is a
yeah,
fun song. We like this character,
yeah, yeah,
and it felt like Catherine Hahn really did a lot in that role. Where there was a little bit of like, oh, is it Mephisto thing again?
yeah,
But I thought the twist was really well handled, really pulled off well. And
yeah.
for a minute, I was like, are you just gonna be like Agatha is like pretty awful on WandaVision, and then through Agatha All Along, through her like tragic but very dark backstory, we learned that she's pretty awful. Like she's killed her like fellow witches
she's
for
she's killed a fair
hundreds of
share.
years. So it's
Well,
like I'm
I
like I don't.
liked that. I like that
Yeah.
quite a bit because so many movies, I think, if you have someone who's a villain and they take center stage, you have to humanize them and show why they're actually not so evil. I think about even the recent Disney films where, like, I think Cruella de Vil, she got a
Yes.
solo film, and I don't know why I watched it, but I think like Dalmatians kill her parents or something in it.
It's so
And
bad. They push her over a cliff to a watery grave. It's
exactly.
insane.
So I'm just saying they're like, can we do anything to justify her behavior to make it look like she's less evil? So I'm like, well, that's weird. And Agatha All Along, I didn't get any of that really. Like, yes, you see the tragedy she went through, but if anything, they cement her as more evil because when you think about the forget the flashbacks and you think about what happens in the show, what we find out she's trying to do by the end of the show, every time she's goading people into fighting her, she is literally trying to kill them. She's trying to get them to use their powers on her so she can, sap all of it out of her and kill them and take their powers. She goads them not on episode 1 where they sing the song and nothing happens and she's the only one who knows why and she starts to say they're terrible witches. We're on like episode 3 and she's still doing it. And even though it's not as significant as that in that moment and you think, well, she's just being antagonistic and she's trying to start a fight, by the end of the show you find out every time she did that, including episode 2 or 3 where she's now had a little bit of a relationship with these people, she was saying, if I can get them to attack me, I will literally kill them and steal their powers. So they just lean into the evilness, unless you think I've misunderstood anything, which is fair, but I think they lean into the evilness of her.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. They really do. And like that twist where you find out, like, oh no, she is really evil. Like she is
Mhm.
really doing some nefarious stuff. I really liked,
Yeah.
and I was worried that they were like gonna try and redeem her at the end. But then they kind of do, but not really. Like she gets her punish. Like the fact that she fully dies and like she kind of
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
realizes like I've been awful. Like for hundreds of years, I kind of deserve to die, probably. And then she does, and I was like, okay, she's a great character. Like, does this mean we'll never get to see her again? And she shows up as a ghost. I was like, okay, cool. She's died. She's gotten her punishment. Maybe we'll
Right.
see her as a ghost. I really liked it. It's something now knowing that twist, I want to go back and rewatch it.
Yeah, I've
Because I
also been
think
tempted to rewatch it.
yeah, I think it would
Yeah.
really it would really benefit from a rewatch because yeah, I think that it was all like we said, very well set up and seeded throughout the story. And when you see kind of the flashbacks, you're like, oh shit, that's why she was doing this. It all makes sense. And yeah, so I
Well,
was a really big fan of it. I just want to talk about it a little bit.
oh no, it's good, and I could have full conversation on it, but I will say I think the most important, or maybe like the coolest takeaway that I thought after the entire show was over, and you find out that there was no road, this was always a trick. She just went on it when it opened because the alternative was to die at the hands of the the evil witches after her or whatever. When it's all over, my one thought in my head was, oh, so it was Agatha all along. And that's beautiful. Like, cheesy, but no, like it was like you watch the whole
Yeah,
show,
yeah.
the answer's right in front of you the whole time, and then you finish it and you go, oh, it was Agatha. Like she actually was the one killing everyone. It was never the road. It was Agatha all along. Wow, who knew? That's so cool. Like what a clever little thing they were able to pull off there. I don't know if they centered it, around that phrase or whatever. Maybe they figured it could easily be a show around a trick she pulled, but they really just executed it that well.
Yeah, and it's I think that's just they saw what like the reason that became such a meme and the song became so popular is because it was always her pulling the strings and doing all these things in WandaVision. So it makes sense that it would be Agatha all along once again in her own show. So yeah, I really liked it. Glad you liked it as well, and glad I finally was able to talk about it because I didn't have time to do a whole episode on it, but wanted to mention it here a little late in the game. But yeah,
For sure.
thank you once again for coming on. This was an absolute blast. Before you go, if you want to just pitch your stuff one more time so that
Sure,
where people
that'd be
can find
great.
it.
Yeah, so the podcast name is Marvel A to Z. If you search for it on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or probably whatever service you're on, I should be there. You'll see right away that there's not anything recently up, but that's because the shows I do, they are quite lengthy and I like to think well researched and analyzed. Like the Hulk episode is about 2 hours. That's my H episode. I'm working on one now for I. I'm doing the Illuminati group. That one is close to 3 hours. I'm working on it right now. And I think it will be like the deepest dive into specific characters and their motivations and maybe the philosophical underpinnings of their stories. I think it will be some of the most intricate stuff that you can find today, other than a really passionate conversation with another knowledgeable person like what we're having, which is so great. But that's what I do. So Marvel A to Z, if you want to look it up. I have a Twitter account or X account, whatever you want to call it, as well, which is Marvel A number 2Z. And I'm trying to be more active on there, just sharing panels from all my researching or giving my takes on the stuff that comes out now, because I feel like I have quite a bit of Marvel knowledge to share. So if anyone is interested or wants to talk about the stories in the comics really, really deeply, I'm definitely there for it.
Yeah, you certainly do, and it's always nice when I come on this show and my guest is even more knowledgeable than I am, because usually I'm the one who has to bring all the extra knowledge, but now I'm the one getting taught things, which is always nice when I'm like, okay, cool, you know what you're talking about. All right, so so I'm really glad that you came on, and definitely everyone should go check out that podcast. Yeah, it was a blast. Anybody out there who's listening, if you want to hear some more of my stuff, I do actually a few other podcasts. The main one is called Underrated, where I talk about films that are underrated, underappreciated, or have flown under the radar. If you just look up Underrated Movie Podcast on whatever podcast app or on social media, you can find it there. That's every other Monday. On opposite Mondays, I co-host the Midnight Film Society, where we talk about newly released podcasts, and then I do some extra stuff too. If you're a patron, I have go to Underrated Movie Podcast on Patreon. I release some bonus stuff for this podcast sometimes when there is some Marvel Cinematic adjacent stuff. I will do a bonus episode there. If you're a patron for at least $1 a month, you can get access to those. Like I did one on X-Men 97 with my friend Thomas. That was a lot of fun. And if anybody is in the Southern California area, and you're planning to go to WonderCon, I'm going to be hosting a panel there with a lot of great panelists, including Trisha Aran from Beyond the Screenplay. So definitely come by, check that out. The panel is going to be called The Death of the Mid-Budget Movie. I know we've talked about a lot on this episode, big budget blockbusters, and then obviously, so I'm going to be talking about kind of the disappearance of those 20 to $80 million films that used to be so big in the 90s and earlier, and how those have just kind of slowly disappeared. So if you're at WonderCon, love you to come and check that out. We're going to be there. And if you're around, just come say hi to me. I'd love to meet you. Anybody who's at that convention. But yeah, one more time, thank you so much for being on, and thank you everyone for listening.
Yeah, thanks, Derek.